One time, we successfully mated a bulldog with a Shih Tzu.
Really? That's weird.
Yeah, we called it a bullshit.
Okay, is this guy just making it up as he goes? Yep. Is it all BS? Yep. Here's Big Nate with some more BS, because it's BSing with Big Nate.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another edition of BSing with Big Nate. I am joined by a longtime friend, Mr. Josh Haney. And if you don't know Josh Haney, I had him on a little, I can't remember what month last year, but we were talking about
I think it was right before Halloween.
That would make sense given our relationship.
That sounds about right.
We were talking about some of his authorship, particularly Sentence Fragments of a Broken Mind and The Locket. And now I just want to talk horror culture because that's where we're at this weekend.
Yep.
First and foremost, are there physical copies of The Locket or Sentence Fragments that people can pick up?
Yep, both available on Amazon. Easy to come by. You know, you can go onto Amazon and just enter my name in either The Locket or Sentence Fragments, and it'll pop up on there. But yeah, they're both still available. I know that my CD that you actually did a vocal part on, that has gone the way of the dinosaur. Amazon went out of print on that because they are no longer producing physical media. So
let's talk about that for a second before we dig any deeper. Is we bought a vehicle for one of our sister stations and does not have a CD player.
Okay.
You have to pay extra to get a CD player in your car. And that's apparently where we're at as a society now.
Now, hold on. Let me. So I have a 1997 pickup truck that has a factory standard cassette deck. And I have a 1994 Suburban that has an upgraded stereo that does not have a CD player, does not have a cassette deck, but does accept USB flash drives.
That's intriguing. I mean, cassettes are making a comeback. So.
Yes, there are a lot of bands releasing cassette copies of their music right now, and I'm very impressed with it. A lot of the bands that I really listen to a lot of, things like Blood and Sun. I know that they just released a cassette copy of their last live performance before lockdown went into effect. I want to say Tithe released a cassette version of their newest album. Yeah, there's a lot of bands doing cassette copies now, which blows my mind. I mean, I'm still buying vinyl, so I mean, who am I to say?
Yeah, vinyl. Okay, so I get the appeal, and this is where my discussion always gets weird. I love vinyl.
Yes,
there's the whole experience there.
Yes.
Cassette, I can defend the portability of having, if you've got a cassette deck in your car, that's fine. I'm not going to go home and throw a cassette in. I'm just not. I'm going to throw the vinyl on, pour myself a drink, sit there and listen to it. There's something about the sound and every record, as Quentin Tarantino frequently addresses, every record after a couple of listens sounds different because the needles, the weight,
exactly
quarters to the back of their needle. You don't find that with cassettes. What you find is, damn it, the cassette deck messed up my tape again, and pencil it back out.
That is true. But the other thing, the one thing that I like about cassettes, and this comes from some of my musical manipulations that I've done over the years. I have still probably 15 or 20,000 cassette tapes. Punk bands, metal bands, you name it, I've probably got it. Soundtracks. But some of the cassettes that I really like are stuff that I recorded myself onto blank cassettes because you can get that like ghosting effect where you've recorded something and then you erase it, and then you record something and then you erase it and you record it. And as you're listening to this, you hear these like whispers of like phantom voices in the background.
I mean, that at that point you're getting to the experimental phase, but I'm going to interject and interrupt and be rude and kind of,
Oh, it's okay.
but something I didn't consider about cassettes that vinyl doesn't have is the ability to bootleg fairly
That's
easily.
true. Yes. Yeah. Bootlegging vinyl. Well, I mean, it's easy enough. A lot of the Crosley inexpensive turntables have an aux out. So technically speaking, you could plug it into your computer, you play side one, make an MP3 of it, you know, for personal use, flip it to side two, you know, but the thing about vinyl is that every time you listen to it, it sounds slightly different.
Yep.
You know, there's a one of my favorite albums of all time is Nighttime Night Rhymes by Of the Wand and the Moon, which is an absolutely stunning album. And I've had the CD since it came out. I've listened to it 10,000 times probably. They reissued it on vinyl, and I listened to it, and I was like, wow, I never noticed that, or I never noticed that. And then I listened to it again, and I was like, oh, I never recognized that portion to it. So, you know, I actually just ordered Waxwork Records did Lords of Salem, the soundtrack, and I was able to jump in on that before it went out of print. So as far as Rob Zombie movies go, that's my personal favorite, is Lords of Salem. I think that was really when he hit his like his stride, was that like weird folk horror kind of, you know.
And that's what you call an effortless segue. The real reason I brought you on is to talk about Rob Zombie and some recent news. Lords of Salem is definitely my favorite. I love 31. My least favorite is H2.
Yeah.
Still enjoyed it. Kind of liked what he did, but I know you don't necessarily have the same. I think mine is like blind fanhood.
Well, and that's fine and good. Like, I don't know. Like for me, I find Halloween to be like sacred ground, and that could just be growing up in the 70s and growing up in the early 80s. Because for me, that was like, you know, that was like taboo. You don't touch Halloween. You know. So, but like I said, I'm probably in the minority. I really think that Lords of Salem was his, like, that's probably the one film of his that I have watched multiple times, and still enjoy watching it.
Have you read the book?
Funny enough, no, I have not. It's on my like wish list for Amazon thing. I've been meaning to. This is the time of year for me that I always revisit. End of April, beginning of May. So May Day, I always watch The Wicker Man. It's my favorite film. It's, I mean, I've got the book sitting right here.
So we need to notate for those of you watching, not the Nicolas Cage version.
No, not the Nicolas Cage version on celluloid. Not that. No, this is the Hammer film that Christopher Lee did for free.
Oh God.
I love The Wicker Man. I absolutely do. But so this is the time of year that I always end up watching what everybody affectionately calls the Unholy Trio or the Unholy Trilogy of folk horror. So you've got The Wicker Man, you've got Blood on Satan's Claw, and of course you have Vincent Price and Witchfinder's General. That whole trifecta right there, Witchfinder General, with him going around and hunting witches, Blood on Satan's Claw, which was originally apparently supposed to be like a mix of 3 or 4 stories, and then they kind of just like cut out all the weird exposition and just made it into one story. And then of course the absolute beauty that is The Wicker Man. But unfortunately, no, I haven't read Lords of Salem, the book, because this time of year I always reread The Wicker Man. And then I've also got a stack of other books that I'm in the midst of. And then
He is an author, ladies and gentlemen.
and then I've also become absolutely addicted to the British magazine Hellbore, which
Those look beautiful. I've never read it before.
So it is a British magazine that comes out 4 times a year. It comes out once for Samhain. It comes out once for Beltane. It comes out usually once around Yule, and then it will come out. I think they just released their 5th issue in time for May Day, but it's all folk horror stuff, witchcraft, possession, like sacrifice, things of that nature. It's absolutely beautiful, and it reminds me a lot of like those old 70s and 80s horror magazines that I grew up reading.
So leading up to May Day, have you considered adding Midsummer to the watching party?
Adore Midsummer, absolutely adore it. I have the director's cut. I was lucky enough that when the day that A24 announced that they did the director's cut in the hardbound box and everything, I was waiting to pounce on that shit. And so I've been, yes, I love Midsummer.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, Midsummer was great. But there's a lot of those. I mean, I loved Hereditary. Hereditary was great. There's a lot of those folk horror films that are coming out right now that are just stunning. The Ritual was great. Apostle was beautifully done. There's just a ton of them coming out, or that have recently come out. And it's something that takes me back. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine, actually, that back in the early 80s, I remember watching things. So when growing up in Baltimore, public television station in Maryland would buy out like all of the like random stuff that BBC had.
Yeah.
So they would show the young ones. They would show Doctor Who. They would show Benny Hill, Are You Being Served, Faulty Towers, like all of these like random weird kind of things, Red Dwarf. But the thing that I remember them showing that like always got to me were things like The Owl Service or Children of the Stones. And this is stuff that came out in the late 60s, early 70s, but I saw it in the late 70s, early 80s. And it just like, it was something that I'd never seen before. These very bucolic rural lands where weird things are going on. And, I found it fascinating. And then, of course, when I got older and I moved out into the middle of nowhere, it was very easy to see how these strange kinds of things could be taking place. And I mean, the US has their own tradition of folk horror kind of stuff. We have not to that extent, not Wicker Man, but
we're much younger.
Well, yeah, I mean, but we have, we still have that same kind of thing. We have a lot of the Lovecraftian stuff that takes place in New England. And I mean, I've always loved Lovecraft, that. And then of course, you get into the 80s, and I've gotten into several arguments with people about whether or not Children of the Corn falls into that folk horror catalog.
And okay, so where do you fall? Because I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
I think it very much
100% agree.
Now,
100%.
I think that might be one of the books that Stephen King doesn't remember writing, but
yeah. Well, I mean, did you read that? There was that interview with him recently talking about the directing of Maximum Overdrive, and he said that he was so
high on cocaine.
He said he was so fucked up on cocaine and liquor that he doesn't remember a single minute of filming it.
And he gave himself a cameo. It's just wild.
Yeah, but he's Stephen King. Wouldn't you give yourself a cameo?
He can legitimately. There was a cutaway on Family Guy that referenced it specifically, where he's like talking to his publisher, and
yes,
like, they picks up the lamp.
For my 367th novel, it's about a lamp monster.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, that's funny.
And he can genuinely make stuff terrifying. Like, yes. There are books that are in his catalog that you may not. One that stands out to me is there's this one called Desperation.
Yes. Desperation, which is part 2, technically, not really part 2, but you had The Regulators and Desperation. One written by Richard Bachman, one written by Stephen King, and then,
like, he's got deep cuts. If an author has ever had deep cuts, it's definitely Stephen King.
Yes. Now, with that being said, like, did you hear the story? Was that 6-8 months ago? I think it was, that he said that he will not allow what was the name of the story? The Richard Bachman story about the school shooter.
Yes, I did.
That he is letting it fall out of copyright.
Yeah.
And that it will no longer be included in the Bachman books.
Yep. I did read that.
Which is very funny, because I immediately ran downstairs, found my copy of the Bachman books, flipped through. I was like, okay, good. That story's in there. I don't need to buy another hardcover copy of the Bachman.
It's always tricky when stuff like that. And it is art. Like, reality should not cause art to apologize.
No. But like, this is, I've said that numerous times. You and I have had discussions about that before. And there were art should not be safe.
Yep.
And that's just my opinion. Art should make you think. Art should make you question. Art should make you uncomfortable. And whenever anybody is like, oh, I don't know, or on the opposite, they say, oh yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I say, okay, great. So you've seen a Serbian film, right?
So to those of you watching, don't or do watch a Serbian film. I can't specifically recommend it to you, but I can tell you it's going to make you question some things.
But see, so for everybody that's like, oh, I would never watch a Serbian film, I say, okay, great. Go watch The Holy Mountain. Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain it's an acid trip without taking acid.
Yep.
Watch it. Don't if you don't want to go for the violence and sadistic intent of something like a Serbian film, though I think everybody should see it at least once. Go the opposite direction. Go to the man that wanted to that created these beautifully done hypnotic magical films and the man that wanted to remake Dune, and they were like, okay, time out. No, you are way going off the deep end on this.
Speaking of remaking Dune, I think later this year, there's a remake of Dune coming out.
I don't know where to go with that.
No, I never would have pulled that trigger. It didn't need to be pulled. I think I lost you, Josh. Oh dear. You there?
Yep, I'm still here. There you go.
All right, so we were talking about Dune and how it didn't need to be remade.
Yeah, we'll edit that part in post.
Exactly.
Dune is the perfect like amalgamation of science fiction meets like almost heretical magic.
So, are you talking about the book or the?
Well, I'm talking about
Lynch.
I'm talking about the overall idea. I mean, the film was brilliant. I saw Dune in the theater when it came out, and I remember going to the theater to see it because they let us out of school early that day because there was a solar eclipse. And I remember expressly going to the theater to see Dune, and it was so long that they put a intermission in it that I ran outside, stared at the solar eclipse, and then came back in and finished the film.
That's good timing. That's probably the best Dune story I've ever heard. Out of the actual
that's like that. There's every time I watch Dune, that's something. And then of course, like you have, the Bene Gesserit sisterhood and the spice, and I mean the whole thing. But it's David Lynch. I mean, come on. Has the man done anything bad? Has he really?
The closest we've come is The Return.
Okay, fair enough.
But I enjoyed even that. There was great music. It was a fun tie-in to the previous story. I mean, you're not going to revisit the same story 19, 20 years later and necessarily capture the same lightning in the bottle.
Right.
Speaking of things that don't need to be remade, though.
Oh, no.
And we've talked about Rob Zombie and things from our childhood. Rob Zombie's making a Monsters movie. I love Rob Zombie. I love the Monsters.
Yes.
This is where I may jump off the ship.
Yes. I adore the Monsters. There was, I mean, first off, Yvonne DiCarlo, just dreamy. Butch Patrick, met him, great guy. Fred Gwynn, what can you say about him? Al Lewis, Grandpa, what could you say about him? And then whether you go Pat Priest or Beverly Owens, who cares? Both hot. And the stories were just just beautifully campy. I love the Munsters. I'm terrified.
Yeah, I found myself on that same precipice because there was something about the Monsters. It was so formulaic. The whole shtick worked because it was A, condensed to a half hour, B, because Marilyn, the most attractive one of the bunch, was unfortunate in the family's eyes, and it was the world reacting to them.
Yes,
and that's what made it funny.
And that was the thing, is that the Munsters, the reason that the Munsters work is because the Addams family were able to be the Addams family because they were rich.
Yeah.
If the Addams family weren't rich,
Herman's not an oil tycoon.
Exactly. Herman worked digging graves. He was just your average schlub digging graves, going home to his wife and kids, That was it. And there was something very like very honeymooners-esque about it.
Yeah.
Where you could just watch it, and it was just so good. And then of course, the some of the Monsters films that came after that were great.
I enjoyed Monsters Go Home. That's one where they go to
Yep.
England, and that's where you actually meet Dracula.
Yep.
So I can see Rob Zombie's tie to that because Dracula.
Yep.
But he's also casting. So the rumor, this is not official, but the rumor has it Sherry will be,
of course,
Lily.
Yeah.
And then Richard Brake is going to be Herman. Now, I like Richard Brake. I like Rob Zombie. I like Sherry Moon. However, this just doesn't feel like we're doing justice. Of course, I don't know if you remember a few years back, it was like 2013, 2014. NBC tried to reboot the Monsters, and they had Jerry Connell playing Herman.
Oh, please. Before that, even before that, you had, what was that? I guess that would have been in 96 or 97. You had Have Yourself a Scary Little Christmas.
Was that the one with Vaughn and Al doing cameos, like as patrons at a restaurant?
In the diner, where they're like, "Oh, these people are so nice." Blah 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 blah. Yes,
and it's just, why are we trying to retread the same tire?
Because I am convinced that the genre as a whole has run out of ideas. And that, I mean, you can turn on Netflix and look at some of the stuff that is coming out, and you're like,
yeah.
Now with that being said, there is a lot of good stuff coming out. The Black Spot was amazing. Apparently there was supposed to be a third season of it, but then COVID hit, so they didn't finish filming it. So now it's coming out next year. That was stunning, absolutely stunning.
Speaking on COVID, how long until we see a COVID themed horror movie hit us?
It's already out.
Is it?
Songbird.
I have not seen Songbird.
It was filmed during the lockdown. I think Hulu has it right now, or Prime has it right now, one of the two. But anyway, it was filmed during the lockdown, and it takes place in, I think, 2023. And the lockdown has been going on for like 4 years now. People have been segregated into the immunes and those who are not immune. And there were a lot of people that bad mouthed it and were like, I don't know. And then of course there was the what was the other one that I watched not that long ago that was filmed during the lockdown, where they're all doing Zoom calls, and they're like conjuring up a spirit with a Ouija board.
See, that's the route I would expect to take. I didn't see that one, but that's the route. Like,
yeah,
some modern Bloody Mary where she's jumping through webcams and showing up on Zoom meetings.
Yeah, basically what's happening in it. I wish I could remember the. Damn, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it was basically like all these friends, and they're like, oh, we're still under lockdown, so we can't get together, blah, blah, blah. So then there's like 6 or 7 of them that all meet up on Zoom, and they decide to have like a seance via Zoom. And then like weird stuff starts happening in this person's house and that person's house and that person's house. And, it all kind of comes to a climax. That was, it was predictable, but it was fun.
Sometimes those are the best. I think at least to
Yeah.
just shut your brain off for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always down with that. Not everything can be the lighthouse, where you're sitting there and you're like,
Yeah. If you haven't seen The Lighthouse, another great flick to check out. Willem Dafoe, Robert Pattinson.
yeah,
That was our Pats.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, but that's one of those things where like I remember sitting there at the end of it, just being like,
That to me was a very much. I know it wasn't written as an Edgar Allan Poe story,
oh yeah,
but it was very much.
yeah.
so
I could
influenced.
see that but it had those classic elements to it. If not Poe, then within that same kind of family of Ambrose Bierce or M.R. James, or that kind of family of things.
Gothic American horror.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the same kind of thing where, like, I love The Lighthouse. It reminded me a lot of, as it should, The Witch, which was stunning, absolutely stunning.
That one's so damn subtle.
Yes.
The Witch was very much so till the end. Like I still hours
The Witch-
afterwards was still dissecting it.
Have you seen Hagazusa?
I have not.
Okay. Do yourself a favor, go on Amazon Prime, watch Hagazusa.
All right. You want to spell that?
HAGAZZUSA, I think it is. But it takes place in Europe. Very similar to The Witch. Absolutely beautifully done. But the thing that really stuck out to me was the soundtrack for it. Was just stunning, just stunning. Who did the soundtrack to that? It was a Greek ambient group. I believe it was MMMD, I think was the name of the band. Just phenomenal though.
A lot of people underestimate how important that is. A lot of times the tension's built by the score. I look at Psycho, that shower scene. That's
Bernard
not built
Herrmann.
without those stings.
But the same could be said. I'm personally, I love Goblin. Goblin is that's like the quintessential soundtrack band to me. The stuff that they did for Suspiria, the stuff that they did for Profondo Rosso, just the stuff they did for Tenebrae. Beautiful stuff. Soundtrack is very important to me.
It absolutely is. So before we leave, I want to get a recommendation from you. If people are going to watch one movie over the next 2 weeks.
Oh shit. Well, Mayday's coming up. Watch the original Wicker Man. It's got everything. It's got everything. It's got Christopher Lee. It's got nudity. It's got pagan sacrifice and barbarity. It's a musical. It's brilliantly written. It's got everything. Do yourself a favor. Run The Unholy Trio. Run Witchfinder General. Run Blood on Satan's Claw. Run The Wicker Man. That would be my recommendation. Do yourself a favor.
I can support that. Those are all worth a watch. I'm going to go ahead and recommend a movie that I recently watched for the very first time.
Ooh, talk to me.
Talking about tomorrow on the next edition of BSing with Big Nate. It's a French film, High Tension.
Oh, there is something to be said about that. That whole French like ultra violent cinema High tension, outstanding.
I can
Outstanding
tell
choice.
you will be using some 4-letter words by the end of the movie, and
Yes.
you'll find yourself along for the ride. Josh,
Yes.
of course, you can find his work, Sentence Fragments of a Broken Mind, The Locket. Is the Gruesome Twosome streaming digitally?
Not yet. I had a few people ask me to put it up on Bandcamp. I just haven't gotten around to it yet because my computer died. So I'm actually working on my new book by recording everything on my phone so that I can then transpose it over later. But Gruesome Twosome, which was the combination of 2 different live events, which, was the Silver Shamrock, which was done for Halloween one year, and then Unspeakable Horrors from Stygian Depths, which you took part in, which was a ritual to raise Yog Sothoth, which is done at a different Halloween. I want to put that up on Bandcamp and try to get that out there. And then, of course, I'm still working on Night Howls, trying to get all of the pieces of that back from like 6 different hard drives.
I might be able to help you out with that. I've got some of the content. Of course, Night Howl's a werewolf spaghetti western.
Yeah, basically werewolf, vampires, spaghetti splatter western.
It's a lot of fun. We'll keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, Sentence Fragments of a Broken Mind, The Locket, they are both in publication, worth picking up. I've got my hard copies. You should have yours. Josh, again, thank you so very much for joining me.
Cheers, everybody.